Well, welcome once again. Before we dive in, we just want to give you a quick overview of what you can expect for this evening. So we'll kick it off with a conversation between JenMarie and myself about her latest article, Framing Light. And after that, we'll open it up to the floor for Q&As, at which point you're welcome to provide some questions into the chat. You can do that throughout and we'll, keep note of those as well. Then I'll introduce Andrew, the filmmaker, and Josh, the composer, and we'll share the video premiere related to Framing Light, and of course, open it up again to Q&A around the video. Then we'll pull our lucky raffle winner, and we'll be very excited for what's to come for the rest of the evening. We also have JC here helping us with all of our technical issues, so he'll let us know if we're missing anything in the chat, so feel free to utilize that as much as you want this evening. So just to situate our conversation today, I want to share a bit more about myself and about JenMarie. My name is Ariel Hamburger. I don't think I know anyone here, so excited to be here. I'm a big supporter and lover of music and all types of art. I have presented at various national and international conferences and was invited to facilitate the 2023 North Park Film Festival here in this studio, which is where JenMarie and I first connected. For my career, I'm a planning manager for the County of San Diego in sustainability planning, where I really work on the intersection of social equity, climate change, and environmental justice. JenMarie Landig here is a multidisciplinary artist, and her practice encompasses photography, writing, and movement, all of which we get to see this evening. Her artistry serves as a medium for storytelling, skillfully incorporating her expressive face, body, and the collective human experience and the built environment. So I love that we both have a keen eye, albeit from like different perspectives on the built environment. And I wanted to share something else that resonated with me when reading this article, which was that I also have a stepmother that dealt with cancer. And I love that you characterize that as recognizing the gift of universality, community, and connection. So I'm fortunate that my stepmom has been cancer-free for over 10 years now. Wow. But your connection to your stepmom it really resonated with me. It like really hit a chord. I think there's also not a lot of people that have that close of a connection with step-parents. So I think it's really special. Can you tell us a little bit more about your relationship with Janie and how it inspired the Framing Light article?
Yes, and first of all, I'm sorry to hear that you went through that, and really grateful to hear that she beat cancer and is in remission. As if you've read the article, it's very centered around grief and around the experience of losing my stepmother to cancer. And I think, as you mentioned, it is a universal experience. We all experience some form of loss, whether it's death, even just saying goodbye to a city, a home, a job. Maybe you lose a friendship, a relationship. There's so much loss, and that's part of the cycle of life. And it is this universal thing, but when you're going through it, you might have felt the same way. It feels extraordinary. And so I started a couple of years ago with this intention to write an article about light. And it ended up being some of the darkest years of my life, which was the irony. And because it became the years that my stepmom just gradually declined and passed away. So that ended up framing a lot of my article. And it's also about feeling those feelings of grief, because I think in our Western society, we're often encouraged to get over things very quickly, to show a very public face of looking fine. And you really need to sit in those feelings and really feel them in order to actually process them and let them go.
I love that. Thanks for sharing. Can you talk a little bit more about what that process is like for you in terms of like feeling the grief, letting it be in your body, and sort of utilizing other tools that I know you're well known for in terms of mindful movement and all of your mindfulness practices to kind of process through all of that?
Absolutely. As you mentioned, I'm also a teacher of mindfulness, and I teach mindful movement, which is a fusion of my dance training and movement background with my mindfulness training. And it sounds kind of silly because it's very straightforward to me. Like your body holds on to things and experiences and emotions, even beyond our experience, like even from our ancestors. And we have to move, literally move, to move those experiences and feelings and things that get stuck in us. So my movement practice, as I was going through these years, I already had one, but it really increased, and in different ways as well. When I felt much more in tune with going through intuitive movement versus necessarily taking a very prescribed class. And then the article came out because I do also a lot of processing in writing, and I'm a writer. So, which also leads to photography, because I often see my photographs in words first. And so I'll see the word and then try to capture it with my photograph. And so all of these things were weaving together over this long process to birth this article and birth this video. And it's finally here, and I'm just thrilled.
You have a lot of fans here that are so proud of you for getting to this point. So
Thank you.
thank you for providing, you know, your shared experience with us. Speaking of, like, you know, not just the processing through movement, but also the process of literally like writing this article, I just feel like light as a topic is extremely expansive. There are so many different directions you could have considered, and so much was discussed in the article. But like, how did you figure out what resonated with you most when discussing light, and like what direction you wanted to take it?
This is a good question, because my original article was twice as long.
Release the full article.
The scraps. No, have you heard that expression, kill your darlings?
Yeah.
Okay, I had to kill my darlings. I had a very long article because, as you said, well, first, as I mentioned, this article took me 2 years to write. So I was just writing and writing because light just took me in so many places. And the way I work with this intention of a word of the year is I let it evolve. And so, you know, it leads to one thing and the next. It's like a daisy chain. And I think part of it is that I'm very open to the concept. So I set this intention. And so then I start seeing the ways light, you know, permeates and evolves and manifests everywhere. But I also think I'm attracting it, because people will say, oh, you should read this article about this, or you watch, you know, so it's all coming. And then I distill it, and I just write and write and edit and edit and edit and edit and edit. And I narrowed it down to what you see now. And I think I just had to move intuitively through it and see what flowed, what did I really want to say, what, you know, I wanted to really capture a few key themes. And even if I meandered into some area that seemed related to me, I would be sure to edit it out if it just didn't serve the whole.
Okay. I'd love to like be a fly on the wall of that 2-year long process and really see how it all shakes out. I know when we first met and spoke at the North Park Film Festival, you were also exploring concepts related to light, and we had a conversation around light and dark and how they're not necessarily dichotomous, but they're like part of a cycle, right? And in darkness, there's a lot of birth and life, right?
Yeah.
Has this process changed your thoughts on that at all, or evolved it, or, you know, anything that you want to comment on about that?
100%. I feel, and this is always a journey, but I feel I'm much more comfortable actually with darkness now. With not knowing my next step, with feeling my future is pretty opaque, and just sitting in that. And to me, that's being led by the moon. I write a lot about the moon in my article. What does it mean to see in the dark? And what does it mean to be led by reflective light versus a very big, bright sunshine light, for example? What does it mean to be more in stillness, more in your intuition, more in rest, more in all of these qualities that are associated with the moon? And I feel after going through 2 years of this, I'm much more comfortable with being uncomfortable, basically, and celebrating darkness, and trying to not always fall into, I think, the common language in our society is get to the light's at the end of the tunnel, you know, go towards the light, you know, all these things, which the light is great, but we wouldn't have light if we didn't have the darkness. And as you mentioned, there's so much in the darkness that is fertile and creative and intuitive and magical and a dreamscape and all these things that we need. We need to be on that full spectrum versus just in the light.
That's beautiful. All right, now's the time. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask JenMarie about the article, please send those to us through the chat. We can keep chatting in the meantime until some questions start to pop up. I know something that also I've been thinking a lot about, that just like it's very superficial, but everyone was so excited about the Northern Lights, right? Mm-hmm. And my understanding is that a lot of people who experienced them didn't actually experience them with their naked eye. It was just through their phone or their camera.
I heard about that.
Which is just like, what is that? What is, you know, what is that level of experience, or how do we reckon with that in our modern day, you know?
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting. All right, folks. Not seeing any questions quite yet. Oh, here's one from Megan. Fascinating to hear about the qualities of the moon, wise friend. Where can I learn more about the moon? I actually had a similar question, so.
Well, first I would say read my article. I have to get better at self-promotion and marketing. So yes, go read my article. I have a whole section on the moon and pearls and synergy with all the creatures that are formed in darkness. But otherwise, I can give you actually my like reference list. I'm happy to send that out to anyone who's interested, of just different things I was reading about the moon to kind of put me in the mindset of my article. I don't have anything off the top of my head that I would recommend right away, but I definitely over the course of 2 years was reading different things. So I'm happy to share that.
Yeah, I think everyone would love to see that. Do you have any personal practices when it comes to like the different phases of the moon that you would want to share?
I don't. I tend to sometimes do meditations on full moon, but nothing actually very formal.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's nice. Any other questions? Looks like I don't see any at this time. Well, we can keep chatting, of course. So, you know, just continuing to think about like the perspective of light, and I also loved how, kind of like building off what I was mentioning with the Northern Lights, like how you talk about that it's only through capturing light that you can see an image. And from my mind, it's like not only through a camera lens, but also through our eyes, right? So was that another avenue you were considering going down? And do you want to talk a little bit about that? Like the different perspectives of, and how light can be different, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about this because again, I feel like I dive into this in parts in the article. Well, one phrase that kept coming to me while I was writing this was pinpointing light, because you have to pinpoint your light in your camera. As a photographer, I'm thinking about this light that's coming into my camera, you know, clicking the shutter, it's capturing it. And the irony is once you've captured it, the moment's already gone. So I was thinking about that a lot. And you need light in order to do photography. So that was one avenue I thought about a lot. I thought a lot about color while I was writing my article, because color is literally light made visible. And what are the color associations? I wrote about Janie. To me, my stepmom was a very bright color. Everyone who knew her as joy and fun. She was the life of the party. So I was thinking about that a lot. And then I was also thinking about our literal eyes and the rods and cones in our eyes, and how many more, I'm going to get it backwards. Is it rods or cones? One of them, the one that comes forward when the lights go off, we have so many more of those. And so you can actually really see once your eyes fully start adjusting in the dark. And I thought that was really interesting, that we have a biological support system to actually see in the dark, in addition to our intuition.
And it also reminds me of the part in the article where you talk a little bit about sundials and like shadows. and like what can we see in the shadows, right?
Right.
And depending on where the light is, that can shift and that can change. And I also think it's like what you're open to experiencing.
Yes, yes. That section of the article was very special to me because I also started to see how in a sundial you have to have this consistency. Like you can't tell time if the sundial, arm is moving, right? It stays in one spot and the shadows are actually moving. And I really thought about that because when I lost Janie, it felt like my consistency was gone and I lost my center and my grounded, and like it felt very violent and like a normal, just kind of methodical process of the sun moving. It happens every day, felt very different in that morning that I got the phone call. So I thought about that a lot, which also kind of brings in this gravity piece. Like you can't, like light and time and gravity, like they're all working together. And there's a real gravity moment when you get news like that. And it feels like almost like, yeah, again, almost like you lose gravity, like you could just be knocked off your feet. So I thought about all those concepts a lot in this article.
Yeah. I also love how you talked about like how your sense of time shifts. So kind of like what you're saying just now, that even though truly like time has not changed, it feels different. The way it moves feels different depending on like where you're at in that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes me feel like your next article is going to be about time.
Well, I'll add that to my list
Okay.
because my next article is actually going to be about slowness. And then my next article after that is about balance. So then maybe time.
Okay. That's great.
I like that though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love it. Okay, cool. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat.
Okay.
So I think we can probably move on to discussing and getting to premiere the video, which is super exciting. But before we do that, I want to introduce our filmmaker and our composer of the piece this evening. So Andrew Roddewig is a filmmaker from Chicago. Andrew is currently the head of video production for Cars Commerce, a big little tech company. His last film, To the Nth, was a collaboration with Bucknell University and explored the themes of exponential growth during the pandemic. Joshua Patterson is an artist, filmmaker, and musician also in Chicago. In his works, we seek to find the magic in the everyday. Case in point, his most recent album was recorded in secret inside of a strip mall, which I love. Born and raised in LA, Joshua knows the high desert well and is excited to make music to support this work. So thanks to you both for joining us. John Carlo is going to start the video for us. He'll share the audio and all of that good stuff. Little disclaimer that everyone's video quality is variable, so it could be a little fuzzy or slow at first, but you can always download it soon.
Yes.
Off JenMarie's website.
Yes, it'll be up on my website next week.
Wonderful. And also, please make sure you're in full screen to get the full experience. And give us a couple minutes to get the tech side of things squared away. Yay. Okay. First of all, I just have to say it was such a different experience reading the article and then reading the article and watching the video. And like the collaborative effort between the three of you just truly brought to life and to light a lot of the themes in such a fun and interesting way that was kind of unexpected for me. Which leads me to my first question. I'm going to start with you, and then we'll pass it over to Andrew and Joshua. So although the video draws on the interplay of light in various ways, like there really is so much playfulness in the way it's presented, in your expressions, in your movements, even the like backwards movement, you know, all of that good stuff. And what are you trying to say to us?
um, I think what I'm trying to say is that life is this cycle. You know, we have light, dark, light, you know, life, death, life. Like this is just this continuous cycle. And in that cycle, we have growth. And imagining, you know, I filmed this in the Mojave Desert and it started last year into this year. So last year it was a couple years after the big Bobcat fire, and this year 3 years. And so you're seeing this life, death, life cycle in real time. You know, when I first went out there, it was charred earth, and now you see little Joshua trees budding up and the brush coming back. And so it's this reaching towards the light to complete this cycle of growth. But, you know, we know as humans, and what we're talking about in my article, when you're experiencing such heavy, deep loss, you can feel like in your growth cycle, like actually maybe you're taking a step back. So that growth is that one step forward, maybe two steps back. And Andrew, you know, put a great moment in there where he put me walking backwards because I wanted to express that feeling that this this is just what life is. It's going to be this spectrum of sadness and grief and joy and play. And so I wanted the video to really encompass this cycle, encompass the full spectrum, and to feel like the viewer hopefully feels encouraged that even if they're in a step back, that they're still growing, because when they take their next step, they're going to have new experience, new wisdom, and be in a different place. So that was one of the things I was trying to say.
I love that. And I feel like there's also such like we associate joy with youthfulness, and that's the only time in our lives where like taking a step back isn't really concerning, right? Because so much of our life is ahead of us. But we should be able to and okay with regressing to progress. So
Yes, as someone solidly in midlife who has been taking many steps back recently over the past few years, um, I just feel, yeah, it's never too late.
yeah, and even is it even a step back if it's like getting you to where you're going,
Exactly.
right? Awesome. Well, I want to ask Andrew a question. So, Andrew, can you tell us a bit more about your process of taking JenMarie's vision and creating what you did?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. First off, I just have to, of course, give a big shout out to Josh Patterson on the music there. Every time I hear this music, I just love it more and more every single time. This is such an interesting project because, like, JenMarie came to me with this when I was also going through my own period of grief, and a lot of the things that she was talking about just really resonated with me. And so, sort of, the perspective that I always take when I'm working on like a collaborative piece is try and get like really deep into the collaborators, the other artists, like background and mindset and their own inspiration, and try and just kind of like build upon, right? It's transferring mediums. And so I really just thought about like, let me get really deep into where JenMarie is coming from, bring a little bit of my own experiences and try and sort of find the same like wavelength that she's operating on, and then just bring my own craft and skills to that. And honestly, one of my best skills with being a video producer is just connecting people. So I really just thought, well, if I can just connect JenMarie and Josh, who I know has great talent too, and probably has great perspective, let's just talk a lot about the work and about the inspiration and dabble and play and try many iterations. And just honestly, the best part is just talking about the work after each version. So there's no magic trick to it. It's just being working with like open and honest people and having a passion for the craft.
I love creatives that are like, there's no trick to it, just doing it, like as if you all don't have uber talent. Can you tell us, because you brought it up, Andrew, just like what the relationship is between you and JenMarie and Joshua, and like how this connection was formed?
Yeah, absolutely. As Rachel, one of our friends, had mentioned in the chat, JenMarie and I go back to just a period of time when we are all living in New York, kind of figuring our way through New York City at the same time. And all of our paths kind of went differently for a while. And then just out of happenstance, I needed a local in Palm Springs to help me find some locations for another project. JenMarie was there. Her love of architecture was very helpful in identifying some properties. And we met up and just hung out and reconnected. And that's where this project came up. And it just felt incredibly serendipitous at the time to just work on this with her, and I'm so pleased that I did. And Josh and I go back to our days working at the Onion together, as we are a couple of goofballs that worked at a very silly place for a while, and also worked together in Chicago at another company that I'm still with, and are just always enjoy working on things together, and always been looking for an opportunity to do something outside of advertising. And I'd heard what JenMarie wanted to do for music, and it just, as soon as I'd heard that first like reference track that she had, I'm like, I know the guy for this. This is Josh Patterson all over. The jangle, the California vibes. This is the gentleman who's going to bring it to life.
Cool. I love that. Perfect segue to ask Josh a few questions. Can you tell us a little bit more about what elements of the visuals really inspired your composition?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll say, like, I think it was like the second we had an interaction, but it was pretty like detail oriented, and then we decided to have a creative conversation to jump into. And literally the night before, I had pulled the moon card, and read the article, and it all like came together as soon as we started talking, and it just flowed from there. Yeah, we had talked about the desert. I know a lot about the high desert, and quickly started talking about the nostalgia of the desert and how that could be like represented musically. And like nostalgia has light and dark in it, because it is, something that we wish for, but it also is so like tough to deal with because it's not here anymore. And so thinking about that idea and bringing that to um, using analog instruments and recording, pulling from the reference tracks, but also like making music I hadn't made in a really long time. So also was like digging something deep inside of me out, which felt, I think, honest when it came out in the notes. Very simple, but it was like, oh, that was the first scratch guitar lead. And I kept telling Andrew, I'm gonna record it again, record it again. He said, don't record it again. And so yeah, it just was, it flowed so naturally. And yeah, and actually thinking about what JenMarie, what you were talking about today about capturing light, like sound is so similar. It only exists when it's ringing out and it's gone. It can't be. And that's also nostalgia too, it's something that you can't ever have again, and grief tied into that, so it feels like it just all, yeah. Now I'm just blathering, but
No, it's great.
hopefully that answers the question.
It totally does. Yeah, it's like everything is a wavelength that we're just experiencing, right? And thinking about the moon and its impact on the tides and us is mostly made up of water. Like it really is just all interconnected and so very cool. So really appreciate that. Josh, I was also curious, like the piece is short, but it feels like very complete in a way I can't necessarily articulate beyond that. How how did you do that? How did you like make it so full,
Yeah, it like I think I hadn't really thought about that until I was just saying this a moment ago, that I haven't picked up a guitar and really played a guitar in a few years. I have a lot of guitars. I've been mostly playing synthesizers and stuff, and it just like immediately happened. And we've been talking about how it just sounds like there's already an album out there somewhere that sounds like this, that is already like just waiting to be heard. And so it seemed like it was like years of ideas that just were waiting for me to like touch some strings. So yeah, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. I love that this, I didn't know that. I didn't know that till you just said that, Joshua. And I love that this project brought out something that has been in you for a long time. I think that goes in with you pulling the moon card too.
Right, the unseen and embracing that the hidden mystery.
And I'll just tell the audience too, when I heard Joshua's track for the first time, that was it. I was like, you nailed it. I had no notes. I was like, I don't have anything for you to change, like you're done. So yeah, that was pretty magical.
No notes on the notes.
Good one.
I do want to ask you one more question about the video before we open it up to Q&A. So I see there's one question in the chat, but please feel free to ask more of JenMarie, Andrew, or Joshua. In the article, you discuss the difference between light as a verb and as a noun. So for you, does the video feel more like light as a verb or as a noun?
This is why I wanted Ariel to be the moderator. That is an amazing question. Wow. Okay, this is something, I'm a processor, so I really want to like journal on that and reflect. But to spare everyone, waiting for my answer for weeks, I'll tell you instinctually, I think the video actually feels like a verb because I wanted to feel like the lifting of a burden. I wanted it to feel dreamy. Is that a verb? Like just that way to move through life with, just the burdens lifted off your shoulders. It's actually ironic that I find it a verb because to me, light as a verb is very much about community and collective, but I'm clearly the only person in the video. But it's in me, maybe it's hard to see because you're only seeing my one figure throughout the piece, but I'm feeling myself a very big connection to the collective when I'm out in the Mojave Desert. I feel very connected to the sky, especially to nature, to just the sacredness. And so that feels very verb-like to me. And I love that question.
Yeah, the desert feels the same to me. It's like for others, people like vast and empty, but there's something about that feels very warm. But I do also think that hearing the three of you talk, it makes sense that light is a verb because it is clearly a collective process that like fed each of your souls in different ways.
Yeah.
So that's very cool. All right, we have a couple questions. So the first one is from Simone. Love the lights in the dark. Is there a symbolic difference between the brights and the colored lights? And I feel like maybe you could kick us off and then also Andrew can respond to that a little bit because he kind of weaved things in and added lighting.
Definitely. Sorry, I want to make sure I understand the question. Is there a symbolic difference between the light, like the shots in the video during the day and the shots in the video at night?
The brights and the colored light. So maybe like the bright shots and then like the
light painting. Oh, you're probably talking about the light painting. Yeah, what I wanted to show with those two, I wanted to juxtapose both of them. So I'm going to give you a little bit of like behind the scenes. In our first iteration, we had it actually progressing from daytime, sunset, nighttime. And I watched it and it didn't feel right. Again, it's an intuitive process because I thought, no, I actually want this to be paired together because again, it's about this spectrum. Like I'm sitting here today. I'm so excited to be here. I'm very joyful and happy right now. But I've had some really bad news recently. So there's like shitty stuff happening too. And it's just side by side happening all the time. So that's why I wanted the video to be represented that way. Like light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, because that's just how it's constantly unfolding. And when we get to the really dark photos, I wanted to show some of the light painting and I did some like spotlight work with the self-portraits to show like, to me, that was symbolic of my intuition. Like, I am not standing here in complete darkness because if you listen to your intuition, you can still see in the dark. And so that's what that part specifically meant to me.
Very cool. Andrew, anything you want to add?
Oh my goodness, yes. One of the things that was so great about working on this project is that like JenMarie is such a great collaborator and like so intuitive and honest about like her work and our work that like one of the things that happens when you're like working in it. So like sort of the process is like we meet, we discuss, Josh and I kind of go off and do our own craft for a little bit, and then we come back together and we review the work as like a tribunal. And one of the things that's so great about JenMarie is that like I would be in the edit and thinking like, all right, I think this is the direction to go, but I could go the other way, but I'm going to go this way. And then JenMarie would just have these very specific notes where like, yep, the other way. It was the other way, 100%. And like she would just basically hit on like, well, what if we did that? I'm like, that was the other thing I had thought of. So it was just so wonderful to get like her feedback, and she'd be like, oh, I'm going to be really detailed. I'm really detailed. And like every note would be like, yes, thank you. Good. Now I know which direction we need to go because I was fifth, I was one or the other. And so that first cut where we're like, all right, let's just do a straight narrative of like day to night to back to day. And then I was like, oh, but I think there's a way you could do this, just like light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. And she just nailed it. And then I was like, great, now I'm off and running again with this new direction. And so it was just such a pleasure. And the light textures, I think, was something that was kind of mentioned too. I had so much fun just like looking at her images and trying to find like these specific textures and color shades that could then like amplify and connect all the different images together. And I just had a blast like playing with that aesthetic.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite. I think it's like one of the second photos of you where there's like some pink that shows up too. I loved that. Um, Louise says you may have been the only person featured in the video, but it was a communal effort. So
Yes.
that clearly comes through.
Thank you, Louise.
Jeff has a series of questions. We love that. He asks, can you each talk about your starting concept of the project? Was it certain words, thoughts, emotions? How did you come together for a common vision?
I'll start really quickly just by saying I basically asked Andrew and Joshua to read the article, so I had a lot of words. I also created a storyboard. So in your very first question to me about what am I trying to say with this video, I actually had a storyboard created where I was like, this is what I'm trying to say. So I came with a lot of stuff. So I'll stop because I would love to hear from Andrew and Joshua, their perspective.
I'm gonna hand to Josh first because I feel like I just talk too much and
Yeah, well, obviously we had the article, which had a lot of material to work with. And then our conversations, me particularly, we had some like reference tracks, and very directly we were like, we want to do the exact opposite from what we're going at here. And there needs to be some energy in here and something to pull us through. And I guess the idea was to make something that feels alive, despite what you might like, stereotypically go pick if you read an article that was dealing with grief or something like that. And so we wanted to bring some joy in there, and that was the start. And then, as I mentioned before, yeah, the idea of nostalgia and the desert and the dust and started coming in, and yeah, that was the real starting point conversation.
yeah. And for me, like one of the things that I really started with was just the like back to the core concept of like light and dark, that like one cannot exist without the other. You can't have light in the absence of darkness, and darkness doesn't exist except in the absence of light. And like the medium of photography too, like JenMarie had mentioned, that like photography is a way to just capture light. And I'm a filmmaker and I used to be a lighting designer too, and so that just super resonated with me. And so one of the things I really wanted to try and find a way to do is how can we, when we're transferring a primarily still medium of photography with a little bit of video, and still give it, when we transfer it over to a movie medium of video, like some movement without distracting from the images that are so beautiful and so wonderful. How do we just provide, and it's like it's that fine needle of like subtlety. How do you provide movement subtly without distracting from the original work? And so it was a lot of just like starting from that core idea of light and dark with a little bit of movement, and then just refining until we all felt really good about the final piece.
Yeah, and to Jeff's question about how you come together for a common vision, it really just seems like it was a truly iterative and collective process until you intuitively felt like it hit the right chords and the right lights, right?
Yeah.
And just that's pretty neat.
Yeah, you nailed it.
It seems like there's probably something that needs to be done again between the three of you. Have you guys talked about that at all?
I told them because, they're in Chicago, I'm in California. So I would go out to the Mojave and create all these assets and send them over. So I said, our next project, you guys actually need to come to the Mojave and we'll do it like together in person. So that's putting that out there because that's my dream.
Very cool. Yeah. Anything else that we want to ask? Anybody else no other questions from the chat at this point? I think that we've kind of done a really good job of covering a lot of the process, the thought behind it. I really love, Andrew and Joshua, all of your openness and willingness to share. I can't get over the like pulling of the moon card and how that just ties into everything, and how Andrew was the bridge between it all. So thank you so much for sharing. I know we do have a raffle this evening. So JC, if you don't mind spinning that randomized wheel and we'll find out who won.
The winner is Maha Bazari.
Maha!
Maha, did you hear that? I don't know if Maha's still on the Zoom, but
She is, luckily.
yay!
She says, woo, thank you!
Maha, you won a postcard set. So you might not know because this just came out last week, but I have a special edition postcard set of desert photographs. So architecture, self-portraits, a mix of both. So that is on the table. And then I have my classic monochrome and color set. You can have your choice. And there might be another little surprise and treat to all of you who registered. Stay tuned. I'll send an email about that. But congratulations, Maha.
Yeah, so exciting. And don't forget, if you want to rewatch the video or share it with friends, that will be up on JenMarie's website next week. But before we sign off, can you let us know what's next for you and how folks can stay engaged with what you're doing?
Yes, everyone, I think you're all on my mailing list if you're here today, but if you're not, please sign up. What's coming up is I'm going to be doing a workshop in San Diego. So if you're local, I'll be doing my mindful movement work. I'm also going to Greece in September. So you're all invited to Greece. If you can't make it, please follow along. I'm going to be trying to do a lot of Instagram Live and posting and really engaging everyone. And I'll be having a photography exhibition in Greece. I'll also be showing my 2 pieces of video art. I'll be teaching my mindful movement work, and I'll be ending the residency there with a dance performance. So all of this is going to be recorded, and I just hope we all can stay engaged and connected through all of this work. And please, if you have any show or anything coming up that you'd like my support to, just reach out. I really believe in reciprocity and generosity of our time. And on that, I thank you so much for your time tonight.
Yeah, thank you all so much for attending this evening, and to our artists for their contribution to the canon. We see you, we love you, stay beautiful.
Oh, thank you. That's the closing line in my article if you haven't read it. And that just, I'm going to shed a tear. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.